Hello, my dear ones. I am Mrs. Teresa Williams. I'm 73 years old, and today I'm going to share with you a story that I've kept in my heart for many years. Before I begin, please leave your like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love knowing that my stories reach people from different places. Beginning of the story. It was the year 1975. I had just completed 23 years of widowhood. My Augustus had left too soon, at only 42 years old, leaving me alone to raise our only daughter, Agatha. Back then, I lived in Riverside Springs, a small town in the countryside where everyone knew each other by name. Our house was simple, wooden, with a small garden in front where I grew my colorful dahlias. The blue windows, painted by Augustus himself in our first year of marriage, already showed the wear of time. The wooden floor creaked on rainy days, as if the house had a life of its own and wanted to talk to me during lonely nights. Agatha had moved to the city 5 years ago. Intelligent and determined like her father, she got a job at a large company and only visited me on holidays and some special occasions. Letters were our way of keeping the bond. Every Monday, I walked to the post office to send news and received hers usually on Thursdays. Life followed its quiet rhythm. I woke up with the rooster's crow, made my coffee on the wood stove, took care of my plants, visited my neighbor Judith for afternoon coffee, and sometimes went downtown for shopping. On Thursdays, religiously at 9 o'clock in the morning, I went to Mr. Jackson's small market to stock up for the week. I was so punctual that Mr. Jackson joked that he set the store clock by my arrival. It was a simple life, but I had found peace in the routine after so much suffering. Our land, inherited from Augustus's parents, was one of the few valuable things we owned. It wasn't large, but it had a privileged location near downtown and a crystal-clear spring in the back, something that generated some envious looks in the small community. On the night of July 15, 1975, a date I'll never forget, a storm was punishing our region. The thunder was so strong it made the house walls tremble. I remember sitting in my old rocking chair near the radio, trying to tune into some music to muffle the sound of the rain falling on the roof like stones. The living room clock showed just after midnight when I finished making chamomile tea to calm my nerves and prepare for sleep. That's when I heard it. At first, I thought it was just the wind banging against the kitchen window, which sometimes came loose, but no. They were knocks, desperate knocks on the front door. The sound was rhythmic, urgent, as if the person on the other side was in a hurry or afraid. Who could it be at this hour? I thought to myself, feeling my heart race. We lived in difficult times in the country, and a nighttime visit rarely brought good news. I grabbed Augustus's old cane, which I always kept behind the door, more to give me courage than for any real protection, and approached cautiously. "Who's there?" I asked with a trembling voice. "Mom, it's me. Open the door, please." Agatha's voice sounded muffled by the torrential rain, but unmistakable to my maternal ears. My heart froze. Agatha in Riverside Springs. At this hour of the morning. Something terrible must have happened. I opened the door with trembling hands, and there was my daughter, completely soaked, her dark hair stuck to her pale face, her eyes wide with an expression that mixed relief and a deep fear I had never seen before. Her clothes were dirty with mud, as if she had fallen several times on the way. "My daughter, for God's sake, what happened?" I pulled her inside, closing the door behind her while the storm roared outside. Agatha was shaking. I don't know if from cold or nervousness. Her hands were ice cold when she held mine. Her eyes, so similar to her father's, fixed on mine with an intensity that scared me. "Mom," she said in a low, urgent voice, "you need to promise me something. It's very important." "What is it, my daughter? You're scaring me. Did something happen in the city? Did someone hurt you?" She shook her head negatively, drops of water still running down her face. "It's not that, Mom. Listen carefully. Tomorrow you cannot leave the house for anything in this world, especially don't go to the market." I was confused. That didn't make sense. "But tomorrow is Thursday, the day to do the week's shopping, and I need to go to the pharmacy too." My blood pressure medicine is running out. No. The vehemence in her voice scared me. Please, Mom, don't go out. No matter what happens, don't set foot outside this house tomorrow. Promise. But daughter, why? What's happening? You need to explain to me. Agatha took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. Her eyes filled with tears. I can't explain now. Just trust me. It's a matter of life or death. I would never ask you this if it weren't extremely important. I felt a shiver run down my spine. In all my years of life, I had never seen my daughter in that state. Agatha had always been so rational, so thoughtful. The desperation in her voice and the conviction in her eyes told me that something very serious was happening. All right, I finally replied. I promise I won't leave the house tomorrow, but you'll stay here with me, won't you? We can talk better in the morning, understand what's happening. To my surprise, she shook her head again. I can't stay, Mom. I need to go back tonight. What do you mean go back in the storm at dawn? That's crazy, Agatha. There's a car waiting for me at the end of the street. I came just to warn you. She looked at her wristwatch, seeming even more anxious. I have to go now. Remember, don't leave the house tomorrow for anything. And she hesitated for a moment. If someone brings you something, a letter, a package, anything, accept it, it will be important. Before I could ask more questions, she hugged me tightly. A wet, desperate hug, as if it were the last. I felt her heart beating, accelerated against mine. I love you, Mom, she whispered in my ear, more than you imagine. And then, like a ghost in the night, she was gone, returning to the storm, leaving only a trail of water on the wooden floor of the living room and a whirlwind of questions in my confused mind. That night, I couldn't sleep a wink. I sat in the rocking chair, watching the lightning illuminate the dark sky through the window, trying to understand what had happened. Why would my daughter travel hundreds of miles in the middle of the night just to ask me not to leave the house? What danger could there be in my simple routine? And what letter or package should I expect? The questions spun in my mind, like leaves carried by the wind outside, and I had no answers to any of them. I only knew that the fear in Agatha's eyes was real. And that, more than any explanation, was what convinced me to heed her request. What I didn't know on that rainy July dawn was that that unexpected visit would be just the beginning of a series of events that would completely change the course of my life, and that the real mystery was yet to come, hidden inside a yellowed envelope that would reach my hands a few hours later. When the sun finally rose the next morning, I was exhausted. My back ached from spending so many hours in the rocking chair, and my eyes burned from lack of sleep. The storm had diminished, but a fine, persistent rain still fell outside, leaving everything with that gray and melancholic appearance. I looked at the clock on the wall, 7:15 in the morning. Normally at this time, I would already be preparing my breakfast, planning my trip to the market. A pang of anxiety squeezed my chest when I remembered the promise made to my daughter. Not to leave the house for anything in this world. I got up with difficulty, feeling each of my 73 years weigh on my shoulders that morning. I went to the kitchen, lit the wood stove with automatic movements, and put the water to boil. The familiar aroma of coffee filled the house, bringing a bit of normalcy to that day that had already started so strangely. The hours dragged with torturous slowness. At 8:30, I heard the milk truck horn stopping at the corner. Every day I went out to buy a fresh bottle, but that day I just watched from the window while the milkman made his deliveries and moved on. At 9 o'clock, the time when I would normally be arriving at Mr. Jackson's market, I felt a deep restlessness. 23 years of routine don't break easily. My feet seemed to want to move on their own toward the door, as if they had their own memory. But the image of Agatha's frightened eyes kept me anchored inside the house. To distract myself, I decided to clean the kitchen cabinets, a task I always postponed, perfect for occupying my anxious mind. While organizing pots and pans, I found the old cookie tin where Augustus used to keep buttons, coins, and small keepsakes. Inside it, a yellowed photograph showed us young and smiling. Me, at 20 years old, black hair tied in a bun, and Augustus, tall and elegant in his wedding suit. I sat at the kitchen table, the photo between my wrinkled fingers, and let memories take me back to those times. How Augustus had kind eyes, how his smile lit up any room, how he was taken from us too soon, too unfairly. I was so absorbed in my memories that I almost didn't hear the soft knocks on the door. I was startled, looking again at the clock. 10:05 in the morning. My heart raced. Could this be the mysterious delivery that Agatha had mentioned? With hesitant steps, I approached the front door. "Who is it?" I asked, my voice still trembling from the poorly slept night. "It's me, Teresa, Judith." "Open the door, woman. This drizzle is soaking my new scarf." I felt a mixture of relief and disappointment upon recognizing my neighbor's voice. I opened the door, and there she was, Judith Quinn, holding a flowered umbrella in one hand, and in the other something that appeared to be an envelope. Judith had been my neighbor for almost 3 decades, a strong woman, widowed like me, but with an energy that seemed never to run out, always with a scarf on her head and red lipstick on her lips, no matter the occasion. "Teresa, you won't believe what happened," she said, entering without waiting for an invitation, shaking the umbrella on the porch before closing it. "I was helping the late Mr. Noah's daughter-in-law organize his things. You know he died last week, don't you? Well, we were cleaning that back room where he kept the mail when he couldn't deliver it. And look what we found." She extended to me an envelope yellowed by time. My name, written by hand in handwriting that made my heart stop for an instant, was on the front. To Teresa Williams. This is Augustus's handwriting," I murmured, feeling my legs weaken. Judith nodded energetically, her eyes shining with curiosity. "That's right. From what Mr. Noah's daughter-in-law told me, the envelope was inside a box with a note saying to deliver it to you if anything suspicious happened in town. Just imagine, Mr. Noah kept this for all these years. The letter has a stamp from 1960. Teresa, 15 years kept." With trembling hands, I took the envelope. It was surreal to hold something written by my husband so many years after his death. It was like receiving a message from beyond. "I'll let you read in peace," said Judith, showing rare sensitivity. "But tell me later, okay? I'm dying of curiosity." And as suddenly as she entered, she left, leaving me alone with the mysterious envelope. I sat down again in the rocking chair. The envelope weighed in my hands as if it were made of lead, not paper. Why would Augustus have written a letter to be delivered to me so many years later? And how did this connect with Agatha's desperate warning the night before? Carefully, like someone afraid of breaking an ancient relic, I opened the envelope. Inside, 3 pages written by hand on light blue letter paper, Augustus's favorite. "My dear Teresa," the letter began. The sight of those words written by him made my eyes fill with tears. "If this letter has reached your hands, it's because something is happening, something I feared. I write this in the hospital days before what I feel will be my departure. The doctors say I have a chance, but my heart knows the truth, and I want to ensure that I'll be protecting you even after I'm gone. There's something I never told you, my love, so as not to worry you." Weeks before I got sick, I overheard a conversation at Tony's bar. Oscar Mitchell, the one who always coveted our land because of the spring, was talking with another man I didn't recognize. They talked about taking what is theirs by right and waiting for the right moment. When they noticed my presence, they changed the subject, but the look Oscar gave me, there was hatred there, Teresa, a hatred that scared me. I tried to ignore it. I thought it was just drunk man's talk. But days later I found strange marks on the boundaries of our property, as if someone were measuring or mapping. And then I got sick so suddenly. The doctors say it's natural, that my heart was always weak, but something inside me doubts. I can't prove it, and maybe it's just fear talking, but I need to leave this record. I talked to Noah, our mailman and friend of so many years. He promised to keep this letter and deliver it to you if he noticed anything suspicious related to our property or your safety. If you're reading this, it's because he kept his promise. Teresa, my love, I need you to be cautious. Oscar Mitchell is an influential man in town, has connections with politicians and the local police. Don't trust the authorities easily if you need help. Now, the most important thing. I lifted the floor in Agatha's room, under that loose board that always creaked. I kept all our savings there, and some more money I managed to borrow from my brother John. It's enough for you two to start a new life somewhere else, if necessary. There are also the land documents and the contact of Dr. Morris in New York, a lawyer friend of my father who can help you if there are legal problems. My Teresa, how I wish I could be there to protect you, to see our Agatha grow up, to grow old by your side. The idea of leaving and leaving you alone in this world is what hurts me most. But know that wherever I am, my love for you will continue. And if there's something beyond this life, I'll be watching over you until we meet again. With all my love, today and always, Augustus. Tears ran freely down my face when I finished reading. It was like hearing his voice again, feeling his presence after so many years. But along with the emotion came fear. Augustus's words confirmed that there was something wrong, something dangerous lurking around our apparently peaceful life. I reread the letter 2 more times, trying to absorb every word, every warning. The name Oscar Mitchell jumped from the paper like a threat. I remembered him, a corpulent man with thick eyebrows, who in recent years had become an important figure in town. He owned several plots of land and had recently started a construction company. He always greeted me politely when we met, but there was something in his eyes that never gave me confidence. I folded the letter carefully and went to the room that had been Agatha's. The floor creaked under my feet, as Augustus had described. I knelt with difficulty. My knees weren't what they used to be, and I began to examine the boards. It didn't take long to find the one that moved. I lifted it carefully, and exactly as the letter promised, I found a small package wrapped in waxed cloth. With my heart racing, I took the package to the kitchen table and opened it. Inside was a considerable wad of money, the land documents mentioned in the letter, and a yellowed business card from this Dr. Maurice, lawyer in New York. There was also a small golden locket with a photo of the 3 of us, me, Augustus, and baby Agatha, which I thought I had lost years ago. It was at that moment that I heard the distant sound of sirens, many sirens approaching rapidly. I ran to the front window. Several people were hurrying down the street, some running toward Acacia Street, exactly the path I would take to go to the market that day. "What happened?" I shouted to a young man passing by. "Landslide on the slope. Took out the road and some houses below. They're saying the retaining wall gave way." I felt a shiver run down my spine. The slope. I would pass exactly there, at my usual time, if it weren't for Agatha's warning. I went back inside, my legs weak, and fell into the nearest chair. How could Agatha know? How did she know that something would happen today in that specific place? And how did this connect with Augustus's warnings in his letter? At that moment, sitting in my kitchen with a letter from a dead man in one hand and the promise of an uncertain future in the other, I realized that nothing in my life was what it seemed to be, and that perhaps, just perhaps, there were greater forces protecting us, weaving the invisible threads that connected past, present, and future. The puzzle was beginning to form, but important pieces were still missing, and I had a feeling that the answers would come with Agatha's return, if she returned. For now, all I could do was wait with the certainty that I had narrowly escaped a terrible fate that morning. The following hours were of anguish and speculation. The rain had stopped completely, and the sun was trying to break through the clouds, as if trying to illuminate the mysteries unfolding in my life. From time to time, I went to the window to observe the unusual movement on the quiet street. Police cars, an ambulance, neighbors talking in groups with worried expressions. I knew I needed to make a decision. The money left by Augustus represented a chance to start over, away from here, away from Oscar Mitchell and whatever danger he represented. But how to leave without talking to Agatha? How to fully understand what was happening? With these questions spinning in my mind, I sat down again in the rocking chair, Augustus's letter against my chest, and waited. I waited for answers. I waited for my daughter. I waited to discover what future awaited this 73-year-old lady who in less than 24 hours had seen her quiet world completely turned upside down. The next 3 days were the longest of my life since Augustus's death. I alternated between moments of absolute anxiety and a strange, almost supernatural calm, as if a part of me knew I was being guided by invisible hands. On the afternoon of the landslide, I couldn't just watch from the window. Despite Agatha's warning not to go out, I felt I needed to better understand what had happened. I put on a coat, tucked Augustus's letter in the inner pocket, right next to my heart, and walked to the end of my street. From there I could see the movement on Acacia Street without having to approach the accident site. The scene was desolate. The slope above the street had completely given way, bringing with it tons of earth and stones, exactly at the point where I would cross at 9:15 in the morning, as I had done every Thursday for over 20 years. A chill ran down my spine, imagining that if it weren't for Agatha's warning, I could be there under that mountain of mud. It was sabotage, I heard someone say in a nearby group. It was the baker's son, a young man who worked at City Hall. The retaining wall was perfect at last month's inspection. Someone deliberately damaged the supports. Those words confirmed my darkest suspicions. This was not an accident. Somehow, it was connected to the warnings in Augustus's letter and Agatha's desperate visit. I returned home with a heavy heart and a seething mind. That night, I locked all doors and windows with a care I had never had before. I placed a chair against the front door handle, an old trick that Augustus had taught me in difficult times when thieves prowled isolated houses. Sleep, when it finally came, was restless and full of confused dreams. Augustus appeared young, smiling, trying to tell me something I couldn't hear. Little Agatha ran in circles around a tree that grew impossibly, its roots extending like fingers to grab something buried. And Oscar Mitchell watched everything from afar, his face transforming into a grotesque mask. I woke up startled with the first ray of sun. It was Friday, and life in Little Riverside Springs was trying to return to normal, despite the previous day's tragedy. I heard voices on the street, neighbors commenting that, by a miracle, no one had died in the landslide. The only serious victim was a man passing by on a bicycle who got his leg trapped in the debris. At 10 in the morning, I received a visit from young Father Anthony. He had recently taken over the parish, replacing old Father Thomas, and made regular visits to the elderly in the community. "Mrs. Teresa," he said after entering and accepting a cup of coffee. "I came to see how you are. I heard you usually pass by Acacia Street on Thursday mornings. God protected you." I felt it, feeling the weight of Augustus's locket, which I now wore hidden under my blouse. Was it God? Yes, Father. And maybe someone else. I didn't go into details about Agatha's visit or the letter. Something told me to keep this information private. We talked for a few minutes about the tragedy, until the priest mentioned something that made my blood run cold. "The police are investigating," he said in a low voice, leaning in as if sharing a secret. "Sheriff Fonseca said that the retaining wall cables were cut. It wasn't a natural accident." "And do you have any idea who would do something like that?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. The priest shook his head. "There are rumors, but nothing concrete. The strange thing is that it seems to have been something targeted. The cut was made in a way to ensure that the landslide hit exactly that section of the street, not before or after. Exactly the section where I would be passing at my usual time. The coincidence was too frightening to be ignored." After the priest left, I spent hours turning over Augustus's words in my mind. Oscar Mitchell wanted our land because of the spring. That was clear. But would he be capable of causing an accident of that magnitude just to get rid of me? It seemed disproportionate, monstrous. It was only on Saturday evening that I heard knocks on the door again. This time they weren't desperate, like on the night of the storm. They were firm, decisive. My heart raced. Would it be Oscar coming to finish what the landslide hadn't accomplished? Would it be the police with questions I wouldn't know how to answer without seeming crazy? Or would it be Mom? It's me, Agatha. My daughter's voice had never sounded so sweet to my ears. I ran to open the door, momentarily forgetting all caution. There she was, looking exhausted but relieved. Unlike the ghostly apparition of the rainy night, now she wore simple clothes and carried a small suitcase. "My daughter," I whispered, pulling her into a tight hug. "Are you okay? What happened? How did you know?" "Let's go inside, Mom," she replied, quickly looking around, as if afraid of being watched. "I have a lot to tell you." I closed the door, checking twice that it was well locked. Agatha put the suitcase in a corner and sat at the kitchen table. I boiled water for chamomile tea. It had always been her favorite in moments of tension. "Did you receive the letter?" It was the first question she asked, her eyes fixed on mine. "Yes," I replied, surprised. "How did you know about the letter?" Agatha took a deep breath like someone preparing for a long story. "Mom, what I'm going to tell you will seem crazy, but I need you to trust me and listen to the end." I nodded, serving tea in our cups, the same ones we used when she was just a girl. 3 nights ago, I had the most vivid dream of my life, Agatha began, her voice low and intense. I dreamed about Dad. He was exactly as in the last photos, with that brown sweater you knitted for him. He showed me a map of the town, pointed to our house, to Acacia Street, and then to the clock that marked 9:15 in the morning. "Your mother will be there," he said in the dream, "and she won't survive." Then he showed me a letter in a yellow envelope and said, "It's with Noah. He knows when to deliver it." My hands trembled so much I had to put down the cup to avoid spilling the tea. "Your father told you this in a dream?" "I know how it sounds, Mom. I thought it was just a nightmare, that I was stressed from work. I tried to go back to sleep, but I couldn't. The sense of urgency was unbearable. The more I thought about ignoring the dream, the more anxious I became. It was as if something was pulling me here, as if every minute I hesitated was crucial." She took a sip of tea before continuing. "When the day dawned, I was already at the bus terminal buying a ticket for the first ride coming to the countryside. I made up a family emergency at work and took a bus. Then a ride with a truck driver, and finally that taxi that dropped me off at the end of the street at dawn on Thursday." "You came all the way here because of a dream?" I asked, still trying to process everything. "Because of Dad," she corrected gently. "I can't explain, Mom. I was never one to believe in these things. You know, I was always practical, rational, but that was different from any dream I've ever had. It was as if he were really there, as if he had crossed some barrier to warn me." I was silent for a few moments, digesting her words. It was an unbelievable story, almost fantastic. And yet, I myself had in hand a letter written 15 years before, warning of a danger that had just materialized. "After I warned you, I returned immediately to the city," Agatha continued. "I spent the whole day in agony, not knowing if you had listened to me, if you were okay. When I finally managed to call Judith and she told me about the landslide, about how you had stayed home, I knew I had done the right thing, that Dad, somehow inexplicably, had saved us. Did Judith tell you about the letter too?" Agatha shook her head. "No, she didn't mention it. She just said you were safe at home. I decided I needed to come back, needed to understand what was really happening. I got up and got Augustus's letter, placing it on the table between us. 'Read,' I said simply. I saw my daughter's eyes fill with tears as she absorbed her father's words, written so many years before. When she finished, she covered her mouth with her hand, trying to contain a sob. 'Oscar Mitchell,' she murmured. 'That man always gave me the creeps when I was a child. Remember how he looked at our land when he passed by? As if he were already measuring, calculating. I nodded. But causing a landslide, that's monstrous. It could have killed several people. The question is, can we prove it? Agatha was always the practical one, the one who sought concrete solutions. This letter, by itself, doesn't prove anything legally. They're Dad's suspicions, written years before. Father Anthony told me the police are investigating, that the cables were deliberately cut. And who's the sheriff again? Fonseca, right? The godson of Oscar's wife's brother, Agatha remembered bitterly. Exactly as Dad warned in the letter, he has connections with the authorities. A heavy silence fell over us. The reality of the situation was frightening. We were alone against a powerful man who apparently had no scruples to get what he wanted. Mom. Agatha finally broke the silence, holding my wrinkled hands between her young, strong ones. Did you find the money Dad mentioned? Yes, under the floor, exactly where he said it would be. Then we have a choice to make. She continued, her eyes fixed on mine. We can try to fight, denounce Oscar, run the risk of not being believed and expose ourselves even more to danger. Or we can use this money, start over somewhere else, as Dad suggested, away from here, away from him. The idea of leaving my house, the only home I had known for decades, was painful. Every corner held memories, echoes of laughter, of shared moments. The garden where I grew my flowers, the porch where Augustus and I watched the sunset, the room where Agatha took her first steps. But then I thought, what are walls and boards compared to life? What are objects compared to the chance to live in peace, without fear? Would you come with me? I asked, my voice choked with emotion. Would you leave your job in the city to start over with your old mother? Agatha's smile lit up her tired face. Actually, Mom, I was thinking, we always had that dream, remember? Of opening a small inn, serving breakfast to guests, having a huge garden in the back. I remembered clearly. It was an old plan, a dream that Augustus, Agatha, and I shared on sunny Sundays of her childhood. Before the illness, before death, before life took such a different course from what we had imagined. The city was never really my place, Agatha continued. The office work is monotonous. The people are cold. I always missed life here. The simplicity, the real relationships. I just didn't come back because I was afraid we couldn't support ourselves on just your pension. I looked at my daughter. No longer the girl who had left town in search of opportunities, but a strong, determined woman who didn't hesitate to drop everything and travel hundreds of miles at dawn, based only on a dream to save her mother. At that moment, I made my decision. Let's do this, I said, my voice firm despite the tears threatening to fall. Let's start over, realize our dream in another town, away from here. Augustus gave us this chance, and it would be a waste not to take it. Agatha squeezed my hands, her eyes shining with a mixture of relief and excitement. I know the perfect place, Mom. A small town called Blue Ridge, about 200 kilometers from here. I passed through there once on business. It's quiet, welcoming, with enough tourists to maintain a small inn, but not so many as to take away the charm of the place. And most importantly, far enough from Oscar Mitchell and his ambitions. We talked late into that night, planning every detail of our silent escape. We decided we would leave early Monday morning, taking only the essentials. We would sell the house and land later through Dr. Morris, the lawyer mentioned in Augustus's letter. Agatha would return briefly to the city on Sunday to resign and get her belongings. When we finally went to bed, I felt a peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. It was as if a huge weight had been lifted from my shoulders, as if somehow Augustus knew this moment would come and had prepared everything for us, even after his departure. Lying in bed, looking at the familiar ceiling I would soon leave behind, I whispered in the dark, "Thank you, my love, for still taking care of us, even after so long." And I could swear that, for a brief instant, I felt the light aroma of the tobacco Augustus smoked, like a silent answer, crossing the years and the veil that separates the worlds. Monday morning arrived with a thin fog covering Riverside Springs, as if the town itself was trying to hide under a veil of mystery. I woke up before the sun rose, with that strange mixture of anxiety and expectation that accompanies big changes in life. At 73 years old, I was about to leave behind the only place I had called home for almost 5 decades. Agatha was already up, moving silently through the house, organizing the few suitcases we would take. We had agreed on only the essentials, only what had true sentimental value. The rest would be left behind, part of a life we now needed to abandon. "Are you sure you don't want to take the living room dresser?" Agatha whispered, finding me in the kitchen as I prepared a simple coffee. I shook my head, looking at the old piece of furniture that Augustus had restored with so much care in the first year of our marriage. So many memories carved into that dark cedar. But no, it wasn't practical. Where we're going, we'll have new furniture, new memories. Some things need to remain in the past. We had coffee in silence, each lost in her own thoughts. The taxi would arrive at 6 o'clock sharp to take us to the bus station in the neighboring town. We decided not to leave from the local station to avoid arousing curiosity. I walked slowly through the house, saying goodbye to each corner, to each mark on the wall that told a story. That slight depression in the kitchen doorway, formed by decades of footsteps, Agatha's initials, discreetly carved into the wood of the doorframe when she was only 8 years old, the stain on the bedroom ceiling, result of that 1962 storm that almost took our roof. In the garden, I picked one last dahlia. They had always been my favorites, and carefully placed it between the pages of the family Bible we would take with us. A small memory of this place, which, despite everything, had been a happy home in many moments. The taxi arrived punctually. The driver, a young man I didn't recognize, a relief since I wouldn't have to explain our departure, helped put the suitcases in the trunk. I got in the car without looking back. I knew that if I did, my resolution might weaken. The trip to Blue Ridge took almost 5 hours, including a rest stop and changing buses in a larger city. I watched through the window as the familiar landscape slowly gave way to unknown scenery. The green plains were replaced by gentle hills, then by mountains covered with dense forest. The air became cooler as we gained altitude. "Blue Ridge is up high," Agatha explained, noticing my silent observation of the change in landscape. "The climate is milder, even in summer. You'll like it, Mom." When we finally saw the town, I understood why she had chosen this place. Blue Ridge looked like something out of a postcard, with its colorful little houses scattered on the mountain slope, the church tower standing out in the center of the main square, and in the background the intense blue of the mountains that gave the place its name. "It's beautiful," I murmured, feeling a lump in my throat. Maybe, just maybe, we could really start over here. Agatha had temporarily rented a small cottage on the outskirts of town. "It's just until we find the perfect place for our inn," she explained, as the local taxi took us through cobblestone streets. "I talked to a real estate agency by phone yesterday. There are some properties for sale that might work." The cottage was charming in its simplicity. 2 spacious bedrooms, a cozy living room with a fireplace, and a porch that offered a spectacular view of the valley below. There were flowers everywhere, geraniums in the windows, rose bushes in the small garden, climbing vines framing the entrance. "The owner is a widowed lady who is moving to her daughter's house in the city," Agatha explained as we unpacked. "She left the flowers and said she hopes we'll take care of them." I smiled, feeling an immediate connection with this stranger who, like me, was leaving behind a chapter of her life. The first days in Blue Ridge were of adaptation. We learned the town's ways, met local merchants, discovered which bakery made the best bread, and where to find the freshest ingredients. The people were welcoming, curious about the newcomers, but not invasive. We told a simplified version of our story. We were mother and daughter fulfilling an old dream of opening a small inn. No one needed to know the real reasons that brought us there. A week after our arrival, Agatha met Mr. Clemente, a local real estate agent who showed us several properties. The 5th one we visited immediately captured our hearts. An old house, 2 stories, with 6 bedrooms, a large hall that could serve as a breakfast area, and a magnificent garden descending to a small stream. "It needs renovations," warned Mr. Clemente, pointing to moisture stains on the walls and the roof that needed repairs. "But the price is fair. The owner family moved abroad and wants to sell quickly." I looked at Agatha and saw in her eyes the same sparkle I felt in mine. Despite the structural problems, there was something special about that place, a welcoming energy, as if the house were waiting for us. "We'll take it," I decided, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. The money left by Augustus would be enough for the purchase and for the necessary renovations. The following weeks were of intense work. We hired local workers for the major repairs, while Agatha and I personally took care of the decoration. We chose light colors for the walls, floral fabrics for the curtains, and rustic furniture that matched the style of the house. Each room received a flower name and was decorated around this theme: the rose room, the lily room, the daisy room. To my surprise, I discovered there was a renewed energy in me. The years seemed to weigh less while I got involved in creating our new home. Maybe it was the mountain air. Maybe it was the freedom of no longer fearing what the next day might bring. Or maybe it was simply the joy of working side by side with my daughter, realizing a dream that for so long seemed impossible. Our savings were decreasing rapidly with the renovations, but we weren't worried. Dr. Maurice, Augustus's lawyer friend, had taken over the sale of our property in Riverside Springs. "Don't worry about Oscar Mitchell," he assured us in a phone call. "I have contacts at the registry office who will ensure that everything is done legally. He may want the land, but he'll have to pay a fair price for it." It was strange to think that by this time, Oscar had probably already realized that his plan had failed, that I wasn't at the landslide site that fateful Thursday morning. Would he try to find us? The idea still gave me chills, but Blue Ridge seemed so distant from our previous life, so safe in its embrace of mountains, that gradually the fear diminished. In October 1975, 3 months after our arrival, the Secret Garden Inn was ready to receive its first guests. We placed a small ad in the local newspaper and posted flyers in neighboring towns. Agatha, always ahead of her time, made contact with some tourist agencies in the city. I remember perfectly the night before our opening. We were in the kitchen, finalizing preparations for breakfast, when Agatha suddenly stopped what she was doing and hugged me. "We did it, Mom," she whispered, her voice choked. "Dad would be so proud." I felt tears running down my wrinkled face. "He's watching, daughter. I'm sure he is." That night I dreamed of Augustus. It wasn't an anguishing dream like the ones I'd had in Riverside Springs, but serene, comforting. He walked through the inn's garden, touching the flowers, smiling that smile I had loved so much. He said nothing, just looked at me with eyes full of love and approval before disappearing among the trees that bordered the stream. I woke up with a feeling of deep peace. It was as if I had finally received his blessing for this new chapter of our lives. The first guests arrived punctually at 10 in the morning. A middle-aged couple from the city, seeking tranquility for their wedding anniversary. We received them with herbal tea from our garden and cinnamon rolls still warm from the oven. Their smiles of approval as we showed them the accommodations were the first confirmation that we were on the right track. At the end of that first day, exhausted but radiant with satisfaction, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun set behind the blue mountains that now framed my new life. From inside the house, I heard Agatha talking animatedly with the guests, her crystalline laughter echoing through the old walls. I thought about everything we had been through. Augustus's mysterious letter, kept for 15 years by the faithful mailman. Agatha's premonitory dream that had saved my life. The landslide that should have taken me, but instead ended up freeing us from a dark past. Some would call them coincidences, others miracles. I preferred to think they were proof that true love transcends time, distance, even the barrier between life and death. That Augustus, somehow inexplicably, continued fulfilling his promise to take care of us. At 73 years old, when many think life is coming to an end, I discovered that new beginnings are possible at any age, that it's never too late to realize dreams, to find courage, to rebuild oneself from the ashes of what could have been a tragedy. As the first stars began to dot the darkened sky, I made a silent promise to the universe, to Augustus, and to myself. I would live each day in this new place as a precious gift. I wouldn't waste the second chance that had been granted to us in such an extraordinary way. And so, lulled by the murmur of the stream and the perfume of night flowers, I allowed myself to dream once more of the future. A future that against all odds now opened before me, full of possibilities, like the infinite horizon that stretched beyond the blue mountains of my new home. Today, looking back at my 93 years, I still get emotional remembering how it all began. Half a century has passed since that rainy night when Agatha knocked on my door, desperate to save my life. 50 years since we left Riverside Springs and found refuge among the blue mountains that I now consider my true home. Our small inn flourished beyond our most optimistic expectations. What began as a timid dream, born from the need to escape danger, transformed into the most beloved establishment in Blue Ridge. The Secret Garden Inn became a refuge for travelers from all over the country who sought not just lodging, but the experience of truly feeling at home. The 1980s were of expansion. With the money from the sale of our old property, which, as Dr. Maurice guaranteed, Oscar Mitchell ended up buying for a fair price, without ever discovering our whereabouts, we built 3 more cabins on the land among the trees that bordered the stream. Each of them also received a flower name: Violet Cabin, Hydrangea Cabin, Sunflower Cabin. The garden became my sacred territory. My hands, even aged and with arthritis beginning to deform my fingers, never lost the ability to make flowers bloom more vibrant, herbs grow more fragrant. Guests loved our fresh herbal teas and the edible flower jellies that beautified the desserts. Agatha proved to be a natural administrator. Intelligent and visionary, she modernized our operation over the years, adopting new technologies as they emerged, but always maintaining the welcoming essence that made our establishment special. When computers arrived, she was the one who created our reservation system. When the internet became popular in the 90s, she ensured we were the first in the region to have our own website. But more than a business partner, Agatha was my life companion, my safe harbor, my confidant. As I aged and my body began to fail, she gradually took on more responsibilities, always with a smile and never making me feel like a burden. Our connection, already strong before, deepened in a way that only those who have shared a near-death experience can understand. News from Riverside Springs reached us occasionally. We learned that Oscar Mitchell built a large real estate development on our old land, taking advantage of the spring to create a luxury ecological condominium. Ironically, the landslide that should have taken my life ended up bringing him problems. The investigation, even with his political connections, prevented him from starting construction for almost 2 years. In 1983, a letter from Dr. Maurice informed us that Oscar had suffered a stroke, becoming paralyzed on the right side of his body. I felt an unexpected compassion for that man who had planned my death. Life has strange ways of balancing the books. In the 90s, our inn gained national recognition when a travel magazine classified us as one of Brazil's hidden treasures. Suddenly, we had waiting lists for reservations and needed to hire more staff to handle the growing demand. It was a time of prosperity, but also of reflection for me. I was already in my 70s, and although I still kept active taking care of the garden and personally welcoming guests, I began to think more frequently about Augustus, about how he had protected us even after leaving. At night, sitting on the porch watching the stars, I would talk silently with him, telling him about our success, about how his sacrifice and foresight had allowed us to build this new life. It was also at this time that Agatha met Henry, a widower who came to stay at the inn seeking peace after losing his wife. A retired university professor, he had kind eyes and a laugh that reminded me of the tinkling of distant bells. I was happy to see the romance slowly flourish between them, like one of those rare flowers that need time and care to bloom. In 1996, they got married in a simple ceremony in the inn's garden. At 64 years old, my Agatha finally found love. Seeing her walk among the rose bushes, wearing a light blue dress and a crown of wildflowers that I had prepared myself, I thought that Augustus must be watching with the same pride I felt. The 2000s brought significant changes. Technology advanced rapidly. The world seemed smaller and more accessible. Young backpackers began visiting Blue Ridge, attracted by the preserved nature and the authenticity of our small town, which, despite growth, never lost its original charm. I discovered an unexpected joy in talking with these young travelers. Sitting on the porch at dusk, we shared stories. They about their adventures around the world. I about what life was like in the old days. Many were fascinated by my accounts, especially when I told edited versions of the story that brought me to Blue Ridge. Without mentioning Oscar or the landslide, I talked about new beginnings, about how I found strength to reinvent my life at 73 years old. "You're inspiring, Mrs. Teresa," they would say, their eyes shining with sincere admiration. And I would smile, thinking about how life can be surprising. How could I imagine on that rainy night in 1975 that one day I would be considered an example of resilience and courage? In 2010, we made an important decision to officially pass the inn's management to Henry and Agatha, although I continued present and active in daily life. Agatha was 78 years old, Henry 82, but both maintained admirable vitality. Seeing them work together, complementing each other, was one of my greatest joys. It was at this time that we started our storytelling nights tradition. Once a week, we would gather guests in the living room around the fireplace. I would serve my famous herbal tea, and each person was invited to share a personal story, an adventure, an unexpected encounter, a life lesson. Those gatherings became so popular that some people booked specifically for the weeks when they happened. In 2015, I received news of Judith's death, my old neighbor from Riverside Springs. Her niece, who found our address among her aunt's belongings, sent us a kind letter informing us that Judith always spoke of us fondly and kept newspaper clippings about the Secret Garden Inn. Along with the letter came a small package, the old flowered scarf that Judith always wore. "She would want you to have this as a keepsake," wrote the niece. I cried, holding that piece of faded fabric. It was as if a last thread connecting me to my previous life had been severed. I kept the scarf in my dresser, along with Augustus's letter, the two treasures that had crossed time with me. The last few years brought physical challenges. Age finally began to take its toll more severely. My walks through the garden became shorter, slower. I needed a cane, then glasses with thicker lenses. But my mind remained clear, my memory sharp, especially for the events of those fateful days that changed our trajectory. In 2020, the pandemic forced us to temporarily close the inn. They were difficult months of isolation and uncertainty, but also of deep reflection and reconnection with long-kept memories. Agatha, Henry, and I spent long afternoons on the porch, revisiting photo albums, telling and retelling stories of our journey there. It was during this period that I decided to share the complete story with Agatha. Not just the fragments she knew, but all the details. Augustus's suspicions about his sudden illness, the veiled threats he had heard, everything that was in the letter, and that for protection I had kept partially to myself during all these years. "Why did you never tell me this before, Mom?" she asked, her eyes brimming. "Because I was protecting you, my daughter, like your father protected me, like you protected me. Our love has always been a circle of protection." When the inn reopened in 2021, it was with renewed energy. More than ever, people sought welcoming spaces, reconnection with nature, and authentic stories. Our small inn, with its flowered garden and its nonagenarian hostess who told stories by the fireplace, became an even more precious refuge. And now, in 2025, completing half a century since we left Riverside Springs, I feel the circle is complete. Agatha is now 73 years old, the same age I was when I began to tell this story. Henry, at 97 years old, still has those kind eyes, although now they see less of the world around. And well, I have surpassed all expectations, reaching 93 years old with the satisfaction of one who has fully lived each extra day granted. Recently, I received an unexpected letter. A young historian from Riverside Springs, researching the town's urban development, had discovered old documents mentioning the 1975 landslide and the never-confirmed suspicions of sabotage. Investigating further, she found connections to the property that once belonged to the Williams family, who mysteriously disappeared shortly after the incident. She was writing asking for information, any detail that could help reconstruct this forgotten part of local history. I believe there are important lessons about predatory development and corruption that need to be told, she stated in her letter. I showed the letter to Agatha. After so many years, would it be safe to reveal the truth? Oscar Mitchell had certainly already died. The people involved in that plot were probably no longer alive or in positions of power. I think it's time, Mom, Agatha said softly. Time to close the circle, to transform our private story into a warning, a lesson. And so I made the decision to tell everything, not just to that young historian, but to the world, to transform our desperate escape and our courageous restart into a testament to the power of family love, of protection that transcends time and even death. That's why today I share this story with you, so you know that it's never too late to start over, that bonds of love can guide and protect us in the most unexpected ways. That sometimes when a door closes in a frightening way, it's just the universe pushing us toward the destiny that was always ours. I know I don't have much time left on this plane. Soon, I'll reunite with Augustus, completing the circle of our love story. But I leave with my heart at peace, knowing I leave behind not just a prosperous inn, but a legacy of courage, resilience, and faith in the transformative power of love. And who knows? Maybe someday somewhere a daughter will have a dream about her mother in danger. Maybe she'll cross the night to save her. And maybe in that gesture of pure love, another cycle of protection and renewal will begin, like the eternal blooming and wilting of the dahlias in my garden. Life, after all, is this constant cycle of endings and new beginnings. And I, Teresa Williams, can testify that its greatest miracles frequently hide in moments that at first glance seem like our greatest tragedies. And before I say goodbye, my dear ones who have accompanied me this far on this half-century journey, please leave your like on this video if this story touched your heart. Subscribe to the channel to learn more stories like this of overcoming and love that transcends time. And tell me in the comments, have you ever felt that someone who has passed was taking care of you? I'm eager to read your experiences. Until the next story.